The Fatui Harbingers? Varka? The Hexenzirkel? Holy shit. Nod-Krai is shaping up to be epic. We got some really juicy teasers for what's to come, a bunch of different factions all coming together in Nod-Krai, and it does seem like Nod-Krai is going to be its own chapter within itself, or at least a sub-chapter before Shesnaya, since Nod-Krai is part of Shesnaya, but also is its own region governed by the people. A very ambitious place with a lot of industry, technology, but also a lot of crime. Nod-Krai is said to be located in the southernmost part of Shesnaya, and is described to be a pretty hostile place due to the environment, and lack of protection due to regulations, unlike the other nations. Leben even telling us not to hold too much Mora at once, or will be a target for others. It's also the place where Ildadore has his headquarters and his stronghold. But enough of that. Let's quickly recap what they told us in the new Welkin Moon teaser, and go from there. I'm not going to be going over the lore of the Moon Sisters again since I've done that already recently and nothing has changed in that regard. There is already a video on that I've discussed. I also recently broke down the new lore and the artifact set that will pertain to this new lore and chapter. I will reference what you need to know, but if you want to go in deep with that topic as well, I also have a video for that. But I'm going to recap and read the lore. If you want to skip ahead, you can. I'll leave a timestamp pinned. It shouldn't take long, 2 or 3 minutes. We'll recap all they just showed us, the different factions, and then we can break it down and discuss what we should expect. Different Easter eggs and potential storylines for Nod-Krai, as well as these different factions.
The trinity of moon goddesses who once steered the primordial celestial sphere and wove love and passion into the very heart of the world have long since faded into the shadows of time. Yet, those who follow the tides still sing and pray, for a new moon is set to rise. When the eternal moon fell, the heavens and earth were thrown into chaos. When the iridescent moon shattered, the crimson shadow sank into the abyssal sea. When the frost moon ceased to turn, nations faltered and fell into ruin. The world, no longer sheltered by eternity, marches toward its final breath. Yet from the ashes the new moon rises, its ascent spinning the wheel of fate anew. Beneath the shadow of the moonlight something stirs, unseen yet inevitable. The wheel of fate points in 11 directions. The Pallister Edict, that highest of commands, has gone out. With it, the Fatui Harbingers have been summoned back to Shesnaya and dispatched to Nod-Krai. With it, the Fatui Harbingers have been summoned back to Shesnaya and dispatched to Nod-Krai. The people stare in wonder. For what purpose does this army, bearing the banner of the Pale Star, come to their city? Or perhaps the question should be, for whom? The descendants of the legendary Golden Realm, who choose to find new homes among the mountains and forests after abandoning their ancient civilization. The only thing they never forsook was their faith in the moon goddess. However, with the arrival of the Fatui, it appears that their tranquil lives are about to fade into the realm of yesterday. The ancient organization that has long defended Nod-Krai's freedom and peace against the ceaseless incursions and wild hunt attacks launched by the Abyss, now severely weakened from battles past. In the face of new threats, none can say for sure if the new generation of Ritniki will remain able to carry out their mission. Located at the edge of the world, Nod-Krai has always been the stage where conflicts and dramas unfold one after another. How could the Hexenzirkel possibly miss out on this golden opportunity? The armies of the Abyss sweep across the wilderness and canyons like a storm, and if you venture close enough, you may even hear their eerie whispers. These lost soulless monsters appear to be silently searching for something. A small group of elite knights from the Mondstadt Expeditionary Force has followed their Grand Master across Shesnaya, arriving in Nod-Krai. It is said that they have come on a crucial mission. The merchants of Nasha Town formed a commerce guild to maintain basic order. However, how could the outlaws that prowl between the islands be controlled by something as simple as mere rules? It seems that the honor of striking fear into their hearts must go to the boss lady of the Cotorium of Secrets. The treasure hoarders have since spread throughout the rest of Teyvat, but their origin in Nod-Krai remains a little-known fact. The great treasure left behind by Reed Miller, the legendary thief who yearned to create a world without boundaries, is said to be buried somewhere here. The Fae who once followed the first Cryo Archon, the Beli Tassar, ruling the Northlands in their entirety. Though now shorn of their former glory, they still influence the nation in their own ways. One can only guess what path they will take as a calamity draws ever closer. The Guild's strong presence in an adventurous paradise like Nod-Krai is only natural. A certain important figure from the Guild's headquarters is preparing to welcome you as a sign of respect. It began as a small workshop without a certain prodigy used to research the world's best crumb cake machine. But over time, after the creation of many intricate inventions, it gained a new identity as a famous machine workshop. Be sure to mind your manners when begging that genius for a favor though, or whatever component she gives you might be liable to cough out a nasty crumb cake at any time. Beneath the shadow of the moonlight, something stirs. Unseen yet inevitable. The Frostmoon Scions of High Sea Island pray to the moonlight in their hearts, sacred and unsullied. People of the moonlit world, please await the turning of the moon, for it will bring new revelations.
Now let's start with the most obvious one, the Fatui and the Fatui Harbingers that all work under Piero, the director, and the Tsaritsa, the Cryo Archon. They talk about the Fatui Harbingers being dispatched to Nod-Krai. For what purpose does the army bearing the banner of the Pale Star come to their city? Or for whom? Now right off the bat we know it's for Project Stjoua. We know the false sky is something the Fatui Harbingers have not only referenced but have been exploring since back in 1.1 when referenced by Scaramouche. And Mawika already told us that Ildidori had sent subordinates to gather intel on the false sky revealed in Natlan. Gathering the Gnosis, which are the remains of the third descender, along with the fragments of the moon, more than likely the Frost Moon, for their big project in Project Stjoua. Now naturally right away when I read this I think of the Pale Princess and the Six Pygmies, a book that was teased very early on in Genshin to be very important. And I have actually made a video talking about the connection between the Tsaritsa and this book. So I'm not going to be breaking all that down in this video, but to me at least, in order to defy this world's fate and seize authority from the gods, like the Fatui Harbingers intend to do, with the remains of the third descender, the Gnosis, and fragments of the moon, a technology most known and harnessed by Khaenri'ah back 500 years ago before the Cataclysm. It seems that the Fatui Harbingers intend to create a descender or a being that can rival the heavens. Create or transform somebody into a being that can overthrow the heavenly principles. Something Ildidori already tested and experimented with in Sumeru with Scaramouche. And it seems it's going to be all hands on deck for the Fatui Harbingers and Nod-Krai. And being that this place seems to have a history with the Moon Sisters, and people that worship them, even in the ancient times, it makes sense why Ildidori would set up his headquarters here, as a base for operation, a place that's not heavily surveillanced. Now we already knew that the Fatui Harbingers were all being dispatched for Project Stjoua even in Fontaine, so this just makes the most sense what they're doing here, and it kinda makes sense why Nod-Krai would be its own chapter before Shazniah, especially with all these factions. Nod-Krai could be the big Archon quest story of what the Fatui Harbingers are actually doing with all the Gnosis they collect, Phase 2, along with the fragments of the moon. And whatever comes of this in Nod-Krai will then transition us into Shazniah, and that Archon quest. I'm not saying that's for sure, it just makes sense why there's a lot of speculation on them being kinda two separate Archon quests within itself. And honestly, I'm okay with that. It seems like there's gonna be a lot of story here to tell. And Nod-Krai might be a big enough story that needs its own patch. Next we have the Frostmoon Scions, the descendants of a legendary golden realm, finding new homes among the mountains and the forest, abandoning their ancient civilization. The only thing they never forsaken was their faith in the moon goddesses. Now again, I did break down in great detail this new artifact set, but to briefly summarize what they're talking about here, this Golden Realm ancient civilization refers to the humans under the Primordial One, but before the Primordial One came to Teyvat, a very mysterious outlander came and met with the Dragon King, and then when that outlander came and returned, Teyvat was completely different, not ruled by the dragons anymore, but by the Primordial One, the Four Shades, and the angels, along with the three Moon Sisters, or Moons. This outlander then disguised themselves as a human, and discovered that this new world had divine punishment for learning forbidden secrets of the outside world, such strict rules in the new humanity that was oblivious to the bigger picture. Even the angels that were created by the Primordial One were oblivious to the bigger picture, and this outlander fell in love and revealed these secrets to one angel, known as the First Angel. And this outlander wanted to share these secrets with humanity and build a golden realm, with some of the humans of the ancient civilizations under the Primordial One. To me at least, that's what I think they're referring to, are the descendants of that golden realm that this mysterious outlander and the angel they fell in love with created. a golden realm and civilization of humanity that could be equal to the gods and Celestia. That is a very simplified brief summary. And the Frostmoon Scions are descendant people of those old ancient humans, which is a very interesting contrast to most humans in Teyvat today, born in recent times that have no clue of anything before the Seven. But it seems that some humans, like an Enkanomiya and Nod-Krai, pass down this knowledge generation to generation, and still have faith and worship the old gods, the angels and the moon sisters of the old civilizations, the original humans of Teyvat. But then pretty cryptically it says with the arrival of the Fatui, their tranquility lives are about to fade. So it seems that the Fatui Harbingers are going to harness whatever they have, take their knowledge of the old moons, potentially strong-arming the Frostmoon Scions with whatever moon knowledge or even fragments of the moon they have. Anything that the Fatui Harbingers can do for their ultimate goal, they will. So it seems that the Fatui Harbingers are going to clash relatively with the Frostmoon Scions. That might very well be a big part of the Traveler and how we intervene with this. Next, we have a big one, the Hexenzirkel. And as we all know, it's a very ancient society of witches within Teyvat that kinda go under the radar. They are said to be located on the edge of the world, Nod-Krai being a stage where conflicts and dramas unfold. We know the Fatui Harbingers' ambitions. It will change the very fabric of Teyvat as we know it. That is the endgame of this whole story. It makes perfect sense that the Hexenzirkel, witches that want to protect the borders of Teyvat, have ties with this world's fate, would be involved in Nod-Krai. But what's more interesting about the Hexenzirkel than anything to me, and actually makes a ton of sense, I'm not saying this is confirmed, but the Hexenzirkel's symbol is a symbol of a biblically accurate looking angel. Angels make up a big part of what makes up the old Celestia. They were created by the Primordial one to guide humans originally, the first civilizations. And the Hexenzirkel, with their very mysterious powers and what they're capable of, or at least founded by one. Now this is a whole theory for another video, but I have suspected that maybe Alice, Klee's mother, the leader of the Hexenzirkel and one of the most powerful and mysterious beings in all of Teyvat, maybe, just maybe, was that angel, the first angel that fell in love with this Outlander from the new artifact set in 5.5. And that Outlander who could very well be the second who came, the second Descender. That is just a theory that I'm brewing. I could be way in left field, but with this symbolism and what Alice is capable of, as well as her knowledge of everything in Teyvat, just makes a lot of sense to me. After the angels were banished, the War of Vengeance and the new regime in World Order with the 7 Archons, the angels, or what was left of them, formed this society of witches. Or one angel formed a society with powerful witches. Either or. The first angel formed a society of witches with exceptional witches from all across Teyvat to protect Teyvat's borders, exactly like the old angels in Celestia were tasked to do and guide humanity on the right path. Keep them safe. Again, just something I noticed which feeds into my current theory with Alice. But regardless, the Hexenzirkel being present in Nod-Krai is insane. Do I think we're actually gonna meet one of them finally? I hope so. But I'm not gonna hold my breath on that one. The Hexenzirkel seem to be this elusive group that does things from behind the scenes. Definitely not gonna hold my breath that one's playable. And if the Fatui Harbingers are dabbling with the moon having heavy ties to fate and what make up the false sky and how Teyvat functions as this giant collective hive mind within the bubble, the Fatui Harbingers potentially strong-arming the Scions and experimenting with creating a Descender or whatever they plan to do is probably very heavily taboo and forbidden. So I am incredibly intrigued how they're gonna tie into the story. Next, we have the Wild Hunt, which are stated to be armies of the Abyss that sweep across the wilderness in canyons like a storm. Of course, the Abyss gotta be present in some way, and having armies of the Abyss makes perfect sense, because they are a threat to everyone in Nod-Krai, doesn't matter what faction you're from. There really isn't too much I can speculate on. I mean, the Abyss is linked with the Abyss Order, and we know they're trying to construct the Loom of Fate, their own means of defying this world and the ley lines, trying to change the history and data of Teyvat by altering the ley lines and everyone's fate within this false sky. the Samsara. Perhaps what the Abyss is looking for could be what the Fatui Harbingers are also looking for and doing. I mean, all of this lore and factions are being dropped within a moon teaser. So the missing piece of the puzzle for the Abyss and maybe the Abyss Order is the moons itself, the fragments, what's left of them. Plus, Nod-Krai, like any other region's going to need its main villain or characters wreaking havoc, and the Abyss fits that perfectly. It would be cool if our Abyss siblings showed up too, that would just be the cherry on top, but we'll have to wait and see what happens with the Wild Hunt and the Abyss. Now, the Lightkeepers, an ancient organization that has long defended Nod-Krai's freedom and peace against the Abyss's attacks, but now severely weakened. I am sure we're going to meet some pretty interesting characters from this group. They are essentially the Knights of Favonius for Nod-Krai, the organization that defends the nation from the external threats like the Abyss. And them being now severely weakened is probably due to the Cataclysm, since the Cataclysm was just, well, it was nuts. A little bit more than everyone could handle. I mean, 3 Archons died. I can see them being severely weakened. And them being called the Lightkeepers makes sense if their primary focus is to combat the Wild Hunt's attacks. We'll have to learn more about them when we actually get to Nod-Krai. This is another big one, and one we've been waiting for since this game dropped. The Knights of Favonius. Mondstadt is the first place we ever went to. It's where this all began. Their Grandmaster has been on an expedition for years. I'm telling you right now, if they don't make Varka an absolute Chad, I'm quitting the game, I'm deleting it. Done. Shutting the channel down. But seriously though, this is epic. That we're actually going to get to meet Varka finally. It's stated that he took some of his most elite knights across Shaznaya and arrived in Nod-Krai on a crucial mission. It is not surprising to me at all, since the Hexenzirkel have big ties to Mondstadt, and, well, we know people like Lisa obviously know more of the bigger picture, again hinted at by the Pale Princess and the 6 Pygmies very early on with the Abyss Mage, that the Grand Master himself would be investigating something that could change the very fabric of Teyvat, maybe even perhaps aiding the Hexenzirkel and Alice herself, since her daughter is part of the Knights. I am so very curious to see how the Knights of Favonius are going to interact with the main story. If the Traveler does intervene to Fatui Harbinger's grand plans, the Knights of Favonius might be our backup. Or more interestingly yet, maybe the Knights of Favonius enable this. We know that the Archons are somewhat okay with giving up their Gnosis. They know something big is coming. Raiden A referenced a lot recently with Inazuma that the Great War is coming. The next major cataclysmic event in Teyvat is coming soon. The Knights of Favonius could try to prevent this or enable this. It's really hard to say for sure since we don't actually know what Varka's true intentions are or what he's thinking because, well, we haven't met him yet. We know that he must be in the loop. But again, it's going to be absolutely epic to see this guy finally, and the Knights of Favonius, a major part of the story again. We finally get to see what he's been doing on his expedition, talk to him, and see exactly what they plan to do. Now there's another faction called the Voynich Guild that are merchants in Nasha Town, a town within Nod-Krai, a commerce guild to maintain basic order. But then how are the outlaws able to prowl around on the islands? Their symbol being a ship makes sense because, well, apparently Nod-Krai will be a series of islands. And given what we know about Nod-Krai and how it functions as its own little isolated, godless mini nation, it being on its own little oasis kind of makes sense. For the most part, this guild sounds a lot like pretty well every other organization or guild within other nations like the Commerce Guild in Liyue, Xingqiu's family, the Yashiro, Tenryo, Tri-Commissions within Inazuma, the Academia, etc. They just make up part of the government that is Nod-Krai. Even though it's a pretty lawless nation, it maintains just the most basic order for people so it's not a complete free-for-all. Hinting towards their very scary boss lady, the Curatorum of Secrets. Being a commerce guild in Nod-Krai of all places, I'm sure you get a lot of intel, hear a lot of secrets, a lot of details of what's going on. And no doubt there's some corrupt politics going on in Nod-Krai, of course. There was even corrupt politics going on in Inazuma with Kamisato Ayato and his story. I am sure that all of these factions will play a role in the main Archon quest, but most of these day-to-day shenanigans of Nod-Krai, I'm sure, are gonna make up for some pretty epic world quests as well within Nod-Krai. The treasure hoarders, who we know are scattered across Teyvat, but their origins are in Nod-Krai. It states that a great treasure left behind by Reed Miller, the legendary thief who yearned to create a world without boundaries, and it's said to be buried in Nod-Krai. Probably something to do with the moon fragments and the frost moon again. But what's interesting is that we did get a lot of really secretive, pretty big lore drops with the treasure hoarders earlier on in the 1.0 series of Genshin, before Inazuma even, but we haven't really heard much since. They're kind of just these enemies that you beat up across the map, but they're everywhere. If I'm not mistaken, the treasure hoarders are in every nation. You know who else is in every nation? The Fatui. Those goons that you beat up across the map too. So the treasure hoarders are actually a pretty big and significant organization within Teyvat. They just kind of go under the radar. So it's nice that they're going to be an important group within this story as well. And looking at their symbol, it kind of looks like, at least to me if I was a betting man, I'd say they're linked to Conria in some way. I'm sure this Reed Miller is a Conrian, or was a Conrian, maybe has immortality, or a long life species of some kind. Started a group of these thieves that wanted to live without boundaries. I think the treasure hoarders will be a group featured within the Archon quest, but we'll probably get the brunt of their story and their backstory and lore within world quests of Nod-Krai as well. Just another ambitious fellow that wanted to change the world of Teyvat and defy its fate, the boundaries in the fall sky, and created a group of treasure hoarders. Next, we have the Adventurers Guild, which we know have a strong presence in every nation but originate from Shasnaya. We also know that Catherine herself is from Shasnaya, and it also states that a very important figure from the guild headquarters is preparing to welcome you as a sign of respect. Now, if I was a betting man, I'd say that is Sandrone, the 7th Harbinger. Somebody already heavily speculated for years to have created Catherine, and I already think that Sandrone is the big guy controlling the marionette. But Sandrone was already described to be a very industrial harbinger. Finding her in Nod-Krai, especially since all the Fatui Harbingers are being summoned to Nod-Krai, and her creating Catherine makes perfect sense for so many reasons. All of the Fatui Harbingers kind of fill a very specific vital role within the organization. Sandrone is a masterclass engineer for sure, and her whole gimmick being around puppets, and clearly from Fontaine, let's be honest, with their whole aesthetic, but the Fatui having a harbinger at the headquarters of the Adventurers Guild just makes sense. It's an organization that thrives with knowledge, intel, power. Knowing what's going on in every single nation simultaneously, the Adventurers Guild is the best way to do that. Most knowledge passes through the Adventurers Guild with every given nation, so having Sandrone be this mysterious harbinger that greets us totally makes sense, especially since we already know in Fontaine a mysterious harbinger sent their greetings to us and apologies after a fiasco within a world quest. And if all of the harbingers are being summoned there for this big project, it just makes even more sense. This one is actually very interesting, the Snowland Fae, who once followed the first Cryo Archon. It's also nice to get some information on the first Pyro Archon, the original, and apparently it was a male. Ew, we hate that. I mean, if it's not a waifu in a biker outfit, no thanks. But the first Pyro Archon, Belitsar, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, I probably ain't, translates from Russian to white, which I guess makes sense because it's, you know, the nation of cryo and snow. It'll be interesting to learn how the Tsaritsa inherited that role from the first Cryo Archon. And it states that the Snowland Fae are still his existing loyal followers. So I really do wonder their current relationship with the current Cryo Archon, ruling the northern lands in their entirety. No longer in their former glory, but still influence the nation in their own way. One can only guess what path they will take as calamity draws even closer. Commonly in any kind of media or anime, usually refers to a fairy or an elf, or an elf-like being. And we know we've had these elven beings in Teyvat for some time now, without any explanation. Klee, her mother, the rooster, If you've been following my channel for a while now, I've been saying for a while that the rooster's most likely a dragon, but more than anything, I think he's an Archon familiar. I think the rooster is to the Archon what the Valen is to Venti. He might be the leader or a powerful Snowland Fae, now serving the current Cryo Archon. but it seems that this faction is going to function a lot like the Aranara, or the Yokai, the Adepti, an ancient elven-like long-life species that served loyally the original Cryo Archon, Shasnaya, but not as much as they used to. Sounds a lot like Egeria with their loyal Oceanid followers that used to spread Egeria's goodwill, but the way that they say that they're now shorn from their former glory makes it sound like they might not be as loyal or refuse to follow the new Archon, the Tsaritsa. This was also true with the Oceanids with Egeria. Once Egeria perished in the Cataclysm, they refused to follow Focalor, like Rudati of Locke that can now be found in Liyue and Chisa village. So how this faction, these ancient beings, tie into the current story, the Archon quest, and just the overall world building of both Nod-Krai and Shasnaya will be interesting. Through this faction, I think we're going to learn the most of the original Cryo Arc and what actually happened to them. And finally, we have the Clink Clank Crumb Cake Craft Shop, a small workshop that a certain prodigy used to research the world's best crumb cake machine, but over time transitioned into many intricate inventions. But mind your manners when begging that genius for a favor. Now I think this just reinforces that the 7th Harbinger Sandrone is going to be in Nod-Krai and probably has some ties with this shop. But I don't think she's actually the genius itself. She could be. I think it's going to be another mysterious Shasnayan individual that we meet, working under the 7th Harbinger. There's so many reasons why the 7th Harbinger would be in Nod-Krai, but I think this craft shop, just from reading it, is going to serve as the basis for the mechanics of Shasnaya and Nod-Krai. I mean, we know that we get new world puzzles and exploration, new gizmos and gimmicks every single region. Right now it's Phlogiston and Natlan, Ocean and Numian mechanics in Fontaine, with different types of puzzles. I think this place might make up a big portion of the lore behind the mechanics in Nod-Krai, since it actually states that there's a component that we might be given from this genius. That is just my speculation. It should also be noted too that Nod-Krai is supposedly bordering Fontaine, so I think that just adds more context to Sandrone being in Nod-Krai and why Nod-Krai is so industrial. But overall, that's going to wrap up the video. There isn't really much more we can break down and go over until we get more information. I think they're just going to keep giving us breadcrumbs until we get the Nod-Krai. Obviously, a Fatui Harbinger still has to come to Natlan to collect the Pyronosis, and I still think that's going to be Columbina, since Columbina seems the best geared towards actually confronting the Pyro Archon and taking advantage of her humanity, since Columbina is hinted towards having power over emotion. And unlike the captain who tried to take it by brute force, Columbina might be the best suited to take Malika's humanity and use it against her. Use her tragedies and PTSD from the last 500 years against her. Beat her emotionally and psychologically. And again, it also does seem like Nod-Krai is going to be its own big patch in 6.0, which, to be honest, from everything we've seen so far and what they're giving us, I'm okay with it. Seems like there's going to be a crap ton of lore, story to go over, so maybe 2 big patches for all of Shasnaya in completion makes sense, since we know that the story is only going to ramp up from here and we're heading into Phase 2. But again, let me know your thoughts in the comments. What are you most excited about for Nod-Krai? And who do you think will be playable? Let me know, but thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. And as always, we will see you all in the next one. Later.